I'm Karen Myers. I'm founder and president of Blueprint.
I want to tap a little bit in your sort of global perspective around, mega trends that impact the workforce, the need for skills development, and most importantly, what Canadians, governments, employers, our workforce have to be prepared for.
Right now, everyone's mind, of course, is on the long-term impacts of the pandemic. But if we think beyond the pandemic, it's really automation and artificial intelligence that already has had and will continue to have dramatic effects on the trajectory of our working lives. And we know that Canadians are deeply worried about the challenges that increasing automation will bring as they seek economic security for themselves and for their families. So among economists and other researchers who study and analyze these trends, there's actually quite a bit of debate about the nature and the magnitude of the changes that automation will bring. So I want to say a little bit more about this. Economists have done a lot of modeling over the last couple of decades on the impacts of automation, but most of this is in fact experimental. They're using new analytical approaches, non-traditional data sources to inform their projections, and this comes with a lot of uncertainty. Early efforts at predictions were actually quite simplistic, and they didn't really hit the mark. These estimates projected the demise of massive numbers of jobs, and they did not really unfold in the way that we thought they would. Our more recent efforts are much more sophisticated. They take into account a wider range of considerations. Let me say a little bit more about what I mean by this. Early estimates simply looked at an occupation's overall suitability for machine learning. Now we're getting better at identifying some of the things that might actually stand in the way. Particular attention is being paid to what people call bottleneck tasks. And so these are tasks that are difficult to automate because they require a high degree of perception, creativity, or social intelligence. So while a given occupation might have a high overall suitability for machine learning, it might also have a handful of bottleneck tasks, and these might even slow or actually prevent automation. More broadly, we're also more aware of a wider range of cultural, social, financial, and other barriers that can actually slow or prevent automation. There's also some things that can move us in more positive directions, like, for example, good job design. Good job design can actually ensure that the adoption of machine learning enhances rather than displaces jobs. But we don't actually need to take a strong stand on the reliability of any of these predictions to understand how important it is for us to act now. The impacts of automation in AI, they're right in front of us. We already know that we're moving towards an increasingly polarized labor market. On one hand, we've got dramatic growth in what people call frontier jobs. These are jobs that are embracing the production of and use of new technologies, and they're highly paid jobs, held disproportionately by well-educated men. And on the other hand, we also have growth in what people call last mile jobs, like an Amazon order picker. These jobs involve carrying out nearly automated tasks that require only a residual set of human abilities. And these are jobs that are typically held by individuals without post-secondary education, and they pay well below average wages. So in other words, our labor market is already highly polarized in terms of skills requirements and wage levels. So much so that I think a defining question of our time is most certainly going to be, how can we ensure that all Canadians, especially those without post-secondary education, have the skills that they need, not just to survive, but to thrive in our modern economy?
Let's talk a little bit about, solutions, basically. So how would you describe the current approach to empowering and supporting Canadians to make career transitions, given everything you've just told us? And basically, what are we doing right? And what do you think we're doing wrong or we should be doing differently?
I think Canada is doing really well on many counts, and there are many things that we are doing right. Overall, we have really high levels of post-secondary educational attainment, and we also have relatively high levels of literacy and numeracy. So these are things that serve as solid foundations. But when we think of our overall employment and training systems, what has served us well in the relatively stable environment of the past, it's not really well set up to address a more rapidly changing labor market and one that requires us to engage in lifelong learning. So right now, our education and workforce development system, it rests primarily on two pillars. The first one supports the development of skills before people enter the workforce. So this is our K-12 and our higher education system. The second pillar supports individuals when they're unemployed. And it's primarily funded through our EI, our employment insurance system. These two pillars, they leave a big gap for working Canadians during their most productive years. And what we really need to close this gap is a third pillar, and one that directly supports working adults. And this isn't to say that there isn't a lot of important work being done right now to support working Canadians. In fact, there are significant pockets of innovation like right across the country. But my point is that these efforts, they're just simply not enough given the scale of the challenge that we're facing. There's a recent report that came out suggesting that to help Canadians successfully navigate labor market changes, it will require an additional $15 billion in investments annually. And it's this sheer magnitude that suggests we need to fundamentally rethink how we support Canadians to be lifelong learners. I also want to add, it's important to say Canada is not alone in grappling with these challenges. Countries all around the world are actively experimenting with how to transform their employment and training systems. So it's a little too early to say definitively what works, but there are some promising approaches that are emerging, and there's lots we can be doing to learn from each other internationally.
What would you identify as the core tenets of a skills strategy that empowers all Canadians, those in and out of work, those who will enter the workforce soon, to be and to contribute their absolute best?
Canada needs a skills strategy that helps all Canadians. And we can think about this in terms of 5 objectives. So first objective should be to help individuals make well-informed career choices. So given the rapid, often super confusing changes in the labor market, individuals need expert advice and guidance. And this one, it's actually bigger than it sounds. To provide good career and advice and guidance at the scale that we're going to need to do it, we're going to need nothing short of a transformation of our publicly funded employment centers. We're going to need to transform these centers into agile, responsive, data-driven, hands-on hubs of high-quality career and training guidance. These hubs, they're going to need to be able to serve not just unemployed people, as they typically do now, but also working adults and employers. The second objective should be to strengthen our actual training systems into more coherent systems of high quality, person-centered, demand-informed service offerings that operate at scale. Third objective is about employers and encouraging them to make hiring and advancement decisions based much more squarely on skills and competencies rather than credentials. I think we're going to realize that relying on outdated credential models is simply not a luxury that we can afford given the challenges we face ahead. Fourth objective is about figuring out how we pay for all of this. As more and more working age adults are going to be required to upskill and reskill, we're going to face an acute financing challenge. The new federal Canada training benefit, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. We're going to need more from employers. And I think in the future, strong collaboration between private and public sectors, it's going to be more important than ever. So lastly, the fifth objective of a Canadian skills strategy should be to foster a culture that supports and celebrates lifelong learnings. Ultimately, it's going to be Canadians themselves They need to take responsibility for their careers and for their own learning. And we're going to need a massive public education campaign on this front. Canadians are really going to need to change the way they think about learning and the role that it plays throughout their lives.